Going on YouTube? Andrew Miller, editor at Hook'em Headlines. Shane Black, contributor at hook'emheadlines.com, coming back at you. A busy day on the 40 for not a lot of great reasons, but we're going to try to take a look forward, focus on something a little bit more, positive. Take up some focus on football and somewhere else that that can be a little bit more conducive to the future success of the program. We're taking a look at portal needs, some Longhorns portal targets, that there's already been some mutual interest between. And then we're going to kind of be talking about some breakdowns, how some of these guys could fit. And I will say this, full disclosure, we're recording this the night of December 12th. The portal situation can change day by day. So, I'm going to link some coverage to the site below, and we will continue to cover. But yeah, go to the site if you want fully up to date. But as of today, and some kind of video breakdowns, a little bit more intuitive discussion on that front. That's what we're doing here. Don't know how much the positional needs are going to change either. So this could, stick with it for a while. But anyway, Shane, yeah, we had a portal entry here not too long ago. Junior Angalau, fifth-year interior offensive lineman heading in. So around a dozen, maybe a little north of, for portal entries now for Texas. But yeah, Shane, what are some of your initial thoughts on the portal? What Texas needs on it so far?
Yeah, so obviously the ever-changing landscape of college football is going to get really crazy in the next – it already is really crazy in regard to the portal. And, the next couple of weeks with early signing day coming up, I think we're going to see a ton of roster movement. We saw last year after Sark's first season, turned over like 30 or 35 scholarship players. It's not going to be that many this year, but I do think there are going to be a significant amount of guys who leave and guys who are brought in. And I think you can really make some program changing additions here. Obviously, the Quinn Ewers pickup last year was huge. Texas, while they might target a backup quarterback, doesn't need a quarterback. We're looking more positions to fill on the defensive side of the ball from what I've seen. But looking back to even like the Herman days, 2018, you brought in Trey Watson, Parker Braun. Texas has always used the portal and has done like a pretty decent job of it. So I'm excited to see what Sarkisian does. Seen a fair amount of names that I'm aware of, and I'm just excited to see what happens. But I think Texas should be a major player in the portal just with how we sit as a program and kind of NIL opportunities and things of that nature.
Yeah, Texas has done well on the NIL front. I'm spending it wiser than some other programs in this state. Not naming any names, but it's, you mentioned some of the roster turnover last offseason, and I think that's an interesting point because I liked the way that Sark handled the portal and the entire staff, the way they handled the portal last offseason compared to their first year. It was a different approach. It was their second year. You knew a lot more what you needed. Got another recruiting class in. Got some of the old guys out. And so, you were filling more. You knew what you needed. You were filling more starting spots instead of just loading up the roster. And so you continue to progress in the right direction heading into the 2023 offseason in terms of how you, strategize the portal. Outside of Anguilla entering the portal today, I don't know how much Texas has really lost to the portal. Obviously, you'd love to have Hudson Card back next year, but that just wasn't going to happen. So I look at last offseason and some of the moves that I really liked. And again, full disclosure, this is not as much movement as we see happening in the portal right now. We look at some of the key guys that Texas picked up last offseason. Diamante Tucker-Dorsey, I think they landed him in May. And, you got Tarek Milton had kind of an impact. I mean, even Ajayi Hall. Those guys were all spring additions. So I think those guys all committed after spring ball was over. So this is going to be a long process. Texas is playing it very patient, but we have a good idea of where the portal needs lie and what some of the early targets are. I try to follow the portal pretty close. It's pretty exhausting to try to track it every single day, but I've got some guys that I really like out of the portal and some opinions I've formed. My initial needs out of the portal, I'm starting to add like offensive line in the way of just like getting an experienced offensive lineman a little bit more now, especially if, with Christian Jones leaving and Junior Angulau gone now. The other thing that I would say I'm increasingly thinking we need to add is help at corner. I just think we're like with the loss of Jameer Johnson. The more I think about that, we're losing Deshaun Jameson. Ryan Watts is coming back, but there's no guarantee that we hang on to Derek Williams in the 2023 class. He has the potential to switch between nickel, corner, safety, the whole bunch. And at this point, it feels like if you're losing Johnson, you're losing Deshaun Jameson, that you're putting an awful lot of pressure on Malik Muhammad to come in and make an immediate impact. I think we need to add someone else that can play field corner, and that would be a spot that we'll dig into a little bit here later when we're going into the breakdowns. One of the two offers that has gone out already. Safety is a position that people have talked about a lot as a position of need. I fully agree. Linebacker for sure, wide receiver for sure, and then the elephant in the room, edge rusher. We need an edge player that can make an impact. And so between all those, I've got to imagine that we're looking probably 8 to 10 portal pickups when it's all said and done. And we'll see how many more players enter the portal from Texas and what happens in the 2023 recruiting class. But I'm right about there. Do you have any other positions of need that you would highlight, or like?
No, I thought so. When I was looking at it, obviously edge is a big one, and I agree with corner. I think, depending on what happens with Jalen Ford filling a hole at linebacker, it's wasn't a spot on the roster where we had a ton of depth this season. That really didn't matter because of how well the starters played. But adding depth there is going to be important. But just kind of what you said, I think 8 to 10 guys seems like a good number. I expect Sark and the staff to make, really poignant selections with who they give offers to. I don't think they're just going to be flinging out offers willy-nilly. The guys that do receive offers, and if they do accept and decide to enroll at Texas, I think are going to be expected to play, pretty significant roles in the 2023 season. Obviously, there could be some exceptions, guys you want to build up who maybe were class of 2022 high school recruits and left after 1 year at their first destination. But I think a lot of this is going to be adding experience and just kind of picking and plugging the holes on this current roster. But totally agree with you. I think if you could pick two positions where you get like really key players, it would be a cornerback and a true impact edge rusher.
For sure. I mean, yeah. Edge rushers, like, it's a tough one for me to scout right now because I pinpointed a few players, but like we haven't really seen edge players first and foremost are hard to come by in the portal. Like really good ones. But like the ones that have entered, I found two that I'll talk about later that I don't think Texas has reached out to yet. That I would like to see a little bit more contact because I think pretty much no matter what, they're going to be impact players wherever they go next, and that it would be an upgrade from probably whatever we would have next season. And I say that with the caveat that I don't know who else is going to enter the portal this offseason. Yeah. Cornerback, like in corner, you're going to have more options. There's already some guys in. One of which I really like that Texas has not reached out to yet, I don't think, and that's a little frustrating, but we'll get to that. But I would say it's good to me that like there's a limited number of players that I feel like, okay, I don't know why Texas isn't getting involved yet. But I mean, every fan base in the portal is always going to say that they wish their program was moving faster on some certain guys in the portal. And then, yeah, it is true that I mean, for one, Texas is focusing more on the recruiting trail right now, so they're just not pressing as much on the portal. But for two, limited number of spots, we don't want to waste those.
I was just going to say, I think it's important to note, so much has been made of the portal and how many players are entering it. But if you really kind of look at it, players that can truly be impact, like impact players for Texas in 2023, there's more than a handful, but there's not like a ton. So the competition for those players is going to be tough. Don't expect Texas to just be able to pick and choose every single guy that they want. I would say when people see those headlines of how many players enter the portal, I assume their first thought is, there's got to be a lot of really good players there. But if you really dig in deeper to it, the amount of guys that then go on to sign Power 5 and contribute in a massive way isn't as many as you think. So that's why it is so important to kind of really scout out the guys that you think can be difference makers.
Yeah, it's so hard to like not get caught up in all this like portal hype when the window first opens in December. Because I think a lot of people forget too that like the amount of like how busy these coaches' schedules are right now is just like insane. I mean, all at the same time right now, you have Texas's staff having to go through this tornado in the portal, prepare for the Alamo Bowl with bowl practice starting like just a few days ago. And then you also have them like Brennan Marion is on the road. I believe he's on, if not on the way, is on the West Coast right now, like going on visits. It's there's a lot going on right now. So I think people need to keep that in mind. Now, sometimes I have to keep that in mind because for me, I'll be scouting a player that I like and I'm like, why are we not reaching out? And then, sometimes you just got to take that step back. With that said,
when you say, just go back, kind of for clarification for the audience and myself as well, you say Brendan Marion's on the West Coast on visits. Obviously, there was rumors about him interviewing for the Tulsa job. You're talking about visits for potential Texas targets.
Yes.
Marion is selling himself to schools out on the West Coast.
DeAndre Moore and Jacoby Lane. He is visiting those guys. So yes, for clarification purposes, yes, that is what he is doing for at least part of this week. He is a busy guy though right now with the Ryan Niblett rumors. That's the thing. Yeah, because he's supposed to be back. They're supposed to be back for an in-home. I believe it's on Wednesday or Thursday with Ryan Niblett amid the Houston rumors.
Yeah.
If you guys don't pay that close of attention to, I'm assuming anyone that's made it this far in the video pays attention to football recruiting pretty close. If you're not, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with Texas players or Texas commits in the 2023 class right now. 4-star Ryan Niblett visited Houston last weekend, and he is fully on flip watch right now. So Texas has a lot going on with the wide receiver room. A lot of the future personnel for that position group is in flux. So, transition back to the portal here. So let's go ahead and talk about some of the, some of the personnel needs, some of the guys that they're reaching out to right now, and some guys that stick out. So I think, we're on the topic of wide receiver right now, and I'll be honest, I think this part of the discussion is probably going to end up going the longest.
Yeah.
Wide receiver is probably the most fruitful position in the portal right now, maybe outside of quarterback. There are it's at least a half dozen guys that Texas has reached out to in the portal. As far as I know, there's no official offers yet. But let me get this out of the way first before I say any of my opinions on the matter. I think that Texas's biggest need in the portal as it pertains to wide receiver largely hinges on what happens with Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington, whether they decide to enter the draft or enter the portal in Worthy's case. I'm operating under the assumption that Worthy sticks around. He could still enter the portal, but I think he's leaning more toward back staying at this point. Also, I'm operating under the assumption that Whittington's going to enter the draft.
Yeah.
He could return, but it sounds like he's still leaning toward the draft. So, assuming all of that, did not know we were in OT right now.
Yeah. Yep.
But assuming all of that, I think biggest need is slot. I mean, especially if we end up losing Niblett, I don't think he was going to compete right away for starting. I mean, maybe, but like probably not competing right away for starting reps. But you still need to bolster the depth while finding a starter there if Whittington's gone. So this is where the first name to my mind is the Mizzou transfer, Dominic Lovett. I'm sure, like, if you follow the portal, you're probably familiar with the name. He was an absolute like revelation for Mizzou during the regular season. Over 800 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns, highest graded slot receiver in the Power 5. I saw he's crazy reliable. I put together something where it was like he was the only Power 5 receiver that had more than 70 targets without a single drop during the regular season. So clearly reliable hands. I mean, if you watch him, yeah, you'll notice that. A little bit of like Devin Duvernay in that regard. I'm not saying he is Devin Duvernay. There are clear differences in their game, but like build-wise and hands, you're going to notice some similarities. And I mean, just guy's a beast on deep balls. He can do a lot of damage there. There's very few routes that he can't run and that he can't run well. And he makes a lot of guys miss, picks up a lot of yards after the catch. He's a good playmaker in that regard. The reason why he sticks out so much to me is that this level of reliability, route running versatility, and the ability to take the top off the defense coming out of the slot or moving around other spots if you want to mix it up, is like, this is something that would also help Quinn Ewers. Lovett would be I think he would actually be better for this offense than Whittington. Blocking is a little bit of a question mark. You'll see some film on him where effort is lacking at times. So that's going to be a point of emphasis. But in terms of his impact as a receiver in the passing game, it's unquestioned. Texas has shown interest. I don't think an offer's gone out yet, and he's favored to land at Tennessee. But maybe this can be like the Isaiah Nayor saga, and Texas can end up flipping a switch here. Because I'll be honest, I don't think, if there's one guy in the portal right now that I think like Texas needs to go all out for, how the hell are you getting better than this out of the slot? He was the highest graded slot receiver in the Power 5. So I think, given the need at slot, he should be your guy.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the crown jewels of the portal and would fit in perfectly. I completely agree with everything you said. So you've definitely done more like scouting on these players than I have. Just from kind of a basic college football fan, I'll say this season, didn't tune in. The only times I really did tune in to Missouri was to get a look at Luther Burden. And every time I would turn on Missouri, there would be a wide receiver that was putting up great numbers. And a lot of the times it turned out to be Lovett, not Burden. So, yeah, he was very reliable, like you said, a guy who would, if Whittington ends up going to the draft, replace that production perfectly. And 0 drops is something that stands out, knowing how Texas struggled with drops last season. So that would be really nice. But he's definitely the crown jewel. I think 24/7 has him as the top or top rated receiver in the portal. So, yeah, I completely agree. If I can just switch it over to another wide receiver, a different body type, Dante Thornton of Oregon. He's a bigger contested catch guy. He's almost 6'5", 185 pounds. I think Texas probably will end up taking 2 wide receivers, one of them in the slot variety, and then another, more big-bodied receiver. Of course, Isaiah Nayor set to come back next season. But kind of to what you were alluding to with Lovett in the slot. Helping Ewers with a guy who can just go up and get the ball would be crucial. Dante Thornton kind of fell behind when it came to finding snaps for Oregon, and I think only had 17 receptions last season. That said, coming out of high school in the class of 2021, he was the 7th ranked wide receiver. So a ton of talent. I like the build. What I was reading, it does say that he's looking to potentially go to a place where he can be wide receiver 1. So, like, unless all hell really broke loose for Texas and they lost Whittington and Worthy, regardless, I don't think there's a situation where Thornton's going to come in and be wide receiver 1. But if he can accept, being in the mix as a guy, I think he could have a solid 2 years at Texas and a guy who would really help out Quinn Ewers.
Yeah, Thornton was an interesting one when he popped up in the portal because, he at first glance for me, he felt like a guy that, like with you working Nayor back in and after you lost Jonah Wilson, you got that backup spot on the outside on the boundary that's just, you don't really have anyone to fill that right now. And so, Thornton, like you said, he was kind of fighting for reps at Oregon and really is still more of a developmental guy that he could come in and, fill that second spot. Isaiah Nayor, if he has a solid season next year, probably going to the draft after. And I mean, Texas doesn't really have a clear down or number one on the boundary after that. And maybe Thornton could come in and be that guy. A lot of raw talent. And I mean, great physical tools. But like you said, I do remember seeing something about that where he does want to come in, compete right away for reps, or not just compete, but really be the favorite to be a starter. And I don't think he's just not going to get that at a place like Texas. There's a way that could work because Oregon hasn't had much stability. Texas, he could come in and develop with, a little bit more consistent presence. Again, assuming Marion decides to stay another year, which I think he probably will. Change titles around. I don't know what that would be, but yeah, maybe co-OC instead of just pass game coordinator. That's separate speculation, though. So fair. I think a fair target to note. I don't think there's been any communication between the two. I know that Texas was at least scouting him out a little bit. I don't know if communication ever took place, though. So transition, because we got a long line of wide receivers to go down. This is a new one. There was a new portal entry that is going to create a lot of intrigue because he's got really, really, really fun highlights, and that's Louisiana Tech transfer wide receiver Tre Harris. I don't know if you saw that name pop up in the portal today or anything around that, but he does fit the mold, probably more of a boundary wide receiver, but I think Texas would move him around because he picks up a lot of yards after the catch. Really, really good acceleration. Not a ton of just straight line speed, but man, he's got a good vertical too. He reminds you of a little bit more of an agile, but not as good of a vertical, not as tall Isaiah Nayor, because he will go up and make those incredible leaping catches. Man, like on an 8-yard catch. I don't remember who LA Tech was playing, but maybe I'll throw up some B-roll of that. But he had a really nice one-handed catch earlier this year that was just crazy, and he times the ball really well. I think he was like 3rd or 4th among group of 5 wide receivers in contested catches during the regular season. So he's someone that can get those. He's going to be a versatile fit among the guys that Texas has gotten in communication with that could fill a role on the outside. He's probably one of my favorites. The problem is I don't know what you do with Nayor when you're bringing in a guy like Tre Harris. Maybe you're looking at moving Worthy more out of the slot, and you're just switching the 3 wide receivers all around. It's doable, and there would be a ton of options there. I just don't know if a guy like Tre Harris is going to be coming in to be a, kind of your 4th option. So that's an interesting one. Dorian Singer out of Arizona. That one's going to be a name that people might be a little bit more familiar with. I think he was he a 1,000-yard receiver?
I don't know if he wasn't, he was right there.
Yeah, he was really solid for Arizona.
Yeah, he was Jaden Delora's only kind of real weapon. 1,105 yards on 66 catches and 6 scores. Yeah, he had that game against USC where he had 3 touchdowns. Yeah, he looks. I don't know a ton about him. I haven't watched any of the film. Just seen what I've seen from Arizona, which wasn't a lot. But the raw numbers look pretty dang good. I see here he had 6 drops, 66 catches, so kind of a high drop percentage. But seems like a guy who can really stretch the field. Played out of the slot 30% of the time, so that's always something to note. I just noted with Tre Harris too. He operated, like you said, wasn't really a slot guy, only 12% of the time. So I think it's important, like you said, to kind of factor in fit just when we're getting our hopes up with some of these guys. You know, just because you're Texas doesn't mean you're going to get every player. And I think a guy like I mentioned at the beginning, Dante Thornton, who hopefully embraces, I mean, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is, like, I think fit is pretty important. From what it seems like Singer could operate out of the slot if need be.
Singer, he can play on. He can play on the outside, but he's a guy that's going to make his money coming out of the slot. Also, runs a lot. He runs a lot of crossers, does some out routes. Kind of makes a lot of his living off kind of glance and post routes, which is where I think he could make I don't think he's as. It's hard for me to describe Singer because I don't want to say that like he wouldn't be. I don't want to say that he would be a bad fit in the Texas offense. I really think he's being maximized at Arizona right now.
Okay.
They've kind of found a way to use him. And I think if there's a way that that's exemplified, it's the fact that he's averaged around 16.7 yards per catch each of the last 2 seasons. And he's posted around the same grades if you're just looking at this from a statistical perspective. But, I mean, he lives off a lot of intermediate routes, kind of a lot of medium throws between the numbers. And with a quarterback that had a good season like Jaden Delora, I mean, if they can keep kind of a core good group with Arizona's offense together, I think that this is one of those situations where I don't think the grass is always going to be greener for Singer. You just had a breakout season with 1,100 yards. This offense is a good fit.
Yeah.
He's not going to – I don't think he's blowing anyone away with his, like, physical tools with measurables or anything like that. And for Texas, I just think you're going to end up finding better talents out there. So Texas has been in communication. He's not my personal favorite fit for Texas, and I think you're going to hear that sentiment echoed throughout the Texas mediaverse. Another name that I like a little bit better, but is still kind of like I would still say that he's further down my big board is Ryan O'Keefe, slot receiver out of UCF. Speedy guy. There's a lot of ways you can use him. And I think that there's potential for him to still break out elsewhere. But, I mean, he's a little bit shorter. You're only going to be able to really use him out of the slot. And also, I think having a guy like that might end up limiting kind of what you can do with some of your better receivers out of the backfield. Like, if you've got a guy like Ryan O'Keefe and then another guy like Keelan that are lined up out wide or motioned out wide, that's not optimal for the options that you have in the passing game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he's not my favorite target because he is a little bit of a deep threat, but that's mostly just because he's going to outrun guys on defense, and I just don't think that's going to happen as much playing against Big 12 competition, which I guess technically even if he stayed at UCF, he would be playing Big 12 competition next year. But he's good. I think there's a lot that he could do. There's a lot of explosiveness he could bring, but I think it would end up being a little redundant. Hey, we won.
Yeah, Marcus Carr, big game. But yeah, I think it's important too. I don't know. Keith, he is from Round Rock, though. Went to Round Rock High School. So I think he was 1,700. He was ranked 1,701 nationally in his high school class. So not a guy who had any Power 5 offers, but yeah, coming from Round Rock, those are always guys that I'm looking through the portal. You know, Texas natives is something that I look to, and then obviously if Texas offered them in the first go around, but yeah, there's just something to note there on O'Keefe.
And don't get me wrong, when I'm talking about, like, if Texas landed a guy like Singer or O'Keefe, I still think that's a huge addition. I'm not saying that's not, but to the same note, like, I think there's better fits. I think for them too, there's going to end up being better fits that they find out of the portal. Like, I think O'Keefe is going to be able to find an offense that is a little bit more centric to him, where it's like he's got specific packages designed for what he brings to the table, not necessarily where he's like out on the field with like maybe a guy with a similar skill set, or that they only find him when he's out in space, that sort of thing. So I'll use this as a transition point to, I guess, one of my more interesting portal targets. I say one of the more interesting portal targets for Texas that emerged today, and was that yesterday? Caden Prather, the West Virginia receiver. He entered the portal at some point like early this week, and he is a guy that I really like as maybe a fourth wideout. I think he was miscast at West Virginia, where he was coming out of the slot a lot, and they weren't really using a lot of what he brings to the table to make him a pretty good wide receiver on the boundary, where like he can burn some guys deep, but then you can also take advantage of some of his footwork and agility over on the sidelines. If you hit him maybe with some back shoulder throws, get him going on some corner routes, things like that. Instead, they were working him on like a lot of screens, a lot of short passes, and I just don't think that's really where he's maximized. I think they were mixing up some of the traits that he brings to the table with, some of the explosiveness and quick plays that West Virginia wanted to get going in their passing game this season. So he's interesting, man. I mean, Texas is familiar with him. I think that, he's a 6'4" wide receiver. Again, if you're a Texas fan, you're probably familiar. Up and down season, but again, I just don't think he was maximized at West Virginia. So I think it could be really interesting at Texas. I don't think he would come in and necessarily be a slam dunk as a day one starter, but a great option as the fourth wide receiver, and Texas really needs something like that. He would be a really interesting one to me.
No, that's super interesting, and it kind of speaks to how quickly this cycle moves. You mentioned he just entered today. I didn't even realize that, but he's got 3 years eligibility, and I think it was against Baylor this year where he just kind of went ballistic. So, yeah, like you said, that's a guy where he would be a nice fourth or fifth option this year. Maybe develop him, turn him into a 3-year guy, and by the time, whatever the 2024, 2025 season rolls around, he's a big contributor for this team. But, yeah, I certainly like the build, like that he's contributed at a Power 5 level. And, that's all I got on Prather.
He was a guy, too, that Brandon Marion, I believe that he offered. Yeah.
Okay.
And then Sarkisian was after when he was at Alabama, going back a little while. And so there's a lot of familiarity there between the Big 12 connections and just recruiting out of high school. Another name to watch here, while we're kind of on the topic here of taller wide receivers, is the former Charlotte wide receiver, Grant Dubose, 6'3", I believe 200-pound boundary wide receiver. I haven't done a ton of digging on him. Most of these players I've watched a good bit of film, but he is just not. He's not the guy when looking through some of the initial numbers and looking through some of the initial film, doing that breakdown, that I really found like, okay, he was catching my eye right away. He's a solid receiver. He can make an impact for a team that needs more of your standard, like, will occasionally go up, get a contested ball, can do like everything pretty well. I don't think from what I was seeing, there was nothing that he necessarily stands out at that catches your eye right away. Again, I just don't think he's the type of guy that Texas would be looking for to make an immediate impact. A few other names that I'll go through here just really quickly. Andrew Armstrong might have committed somewhere already. He was I believe an
Alabama guy?
A&M Commerce.
Oh.
He committed to Arkansas. Yeah, committed to Arkansas yesterday. So anyway, never mind on that name. Another name that I've just not looked into too heavily because this is very recent contact that was established, from my understanding, is an Austin P transfer, DeAndre McCray. He, again, not a guy that I'm super familiar with, and so, or Dre McCray. See if I can get something on him right quick. Yeah, I mean, over 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, 5'9". Probably slot guy worth looking at. We'll do a little bit more digging on him.
He was a running back coming out of high school, so kind of shows his versatility. I like getting the guys in there who can be versatile, almost like a Keelan Robinson.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what all he can do. Maybe special teams impact there as well. Again, I mentioned earlier with Ryan O'Keefe, I think one of the major limitations to me was the fact that just like in terms of the route tree that he can that best fits him, it is kind of limited to what he really excels at. It's just mostly getting him out in space and getting him in the open field to burn guys. He can make a lot of guys miss in the open field. So whereas maybe a guy like McCray, if he can do a little bit more like Lovett, where it's like you just got this crazy versatile route tree, the ball's just sticking to your hands, that sort of thing, where you can really help Ewers right away in the passing game. I think that's more what Texas needs to be looking for out of a slot. So that was pretty much all I had for Ra Thomas, Mississippi State transfer. He was the last guy I wanted to note. I've said Lovett is definitely my favorite wide receiver transfer. And then I think I've got a 2A and a 2B right now between Tre Harris and Ra Thomas. I really like what Thomas can do after the catch. He's about 6'2", had a nice season at Mississippi State. And I think that there's still a lot of room for growth left in his game. He's a guy that you can switch between each of the 3 receiver spots in Sark's offense. He's still pretty good coming out of the slot. He's really quick. And he can still go up and get those contested balls. He's got pretty good hands. I obviously solid Power 5 experience, played some really good defenses and excelled against them this season. So he's a guy I like too. But anyway, we're spending a lot of time on receivers. Is there anything you have on receivers?
No, yeah, I would just say, if you're keeping score at home, Dominic Lovett is kind of the jewel, who is probably the best receiver player and probably fits the best. So, I would say he's the crown jewel, and then there are, a plethora of other guys who would be nice options and good fits.